of patriarchy and postpatriarchy, which is the era we live in, postpatriarchy, and PrePatriarchy, which is the era we know very little about, because the little that we have found from it, we have translated with our patriarchal bias to kind of cohere with the sense that we have made of our world and of culture since the beginning of the patriarchy, which is really the beginning of what we know as history, civilization, and order. And it seems to me that we live in times of post-patriarchy because our definitions of procreative roles have been changed culturally, and we have separated procreation from sex. So by means of artificial insemination, birth control, legalized abortion, IVF, gestational carriers, and all of the other details in our reproductive law, which keeps changing, and which continues to represent the split between woman and her body, which took place at the conception of patriarchy. So basically, out of man's existential loneliness, procreative loneliness, and his procreative insecurity, his dependency on women in order to have a genetic future, this terrible beauty was born, the patriarchy. And everything we now take for granted, whether it's our concepts of money and trade, power and success, dynasty or fame, ethnic or religious or sexual or other identity, all have come from that initial impetus, right? Almost like natural impetus to make up for that imbalance, procreative imbalance, for the procreative advantage that nature gives to women. And I want to unpack a little that procreative advantage, so to speak, right now, because this is how it happens. And this is the first split from which so many other splits have come. So the real split in nature happens in reproduction. It happens in birth, or in other species in propagation. The patriarchal, let's say, split occurred because men separated the procreative role of woman from woman and decided, kind of like inserted himself in the middle of it, and insisted on kind of like co-owning the womb and participating from moment one of the newborn's appearance into that relationship between Madonna and child, between mother and the life that came out of mother. So for 10 months, a child lives off the mother. And I don't want to say the body of the mother, because that's how we split ourselves into body and mind. Our bodies ourselves. Our body and our mind are one. And the quest for that reunion is part of my project here with Speak Sex, a quest to reunite culture with nature and to reunite ourselves with our essential being. So the inception of the patriarchy basically reversed the procreative order, let's say, in nature. And whereas the female had a procreative advantage in nature by being the one who conceives and births and therefore, let's say, naturally owns the newborn that comes out of her body and is still dependent on her and her body for nourishment and for consciousness. Men, through patriarchy, reverses that and makes the newborn the ownership of the father, ergo the paternal name, paternity rights, the fatherland, and countless other ways that we have of thinking about who we are that prioritize paternity and kind of like erase or take for granted maternity as if she were the vessel rather than the only actor. So even though practically speaking, men's procreative job basically begins and ends with a orgasmic ejaculation, and mother's work takes at least pretty much almost a year before the actual birth, where the mothering work that we begin to see begins. But it's all pretty hard labor, even though that's how it works in nature. That's basically the difference in contribution and in accreditation that is in nature. In culture, that is reversed. And that is kind of like how men made up for that imbalance that struck, I think, at the core of him and his sense of himself in the world, right? And here we are, we have separated sex from procreation. So the reason for the patriarchy is no more. Men can hire a gestational carrier and hire an egg donor and send his sperm to a clinic and basically pay a few dollars, show up at the designated time and place of birth, and pick up the child that's legally his. So the fundamental reason for the patriarchy is no more. And that's why we're so distraught. We're so distraught and so unclear. And that feeds, of course, our paranoia. And we want to fight for what's natural. We want to not go deeper and deeper into a path that feels artificial and made up. And so we have these cultural wars, trying to overthink and over-verbalize our split from nature as a culture. And that split begins with the split between woman, and I could spell woman with a B. Woman is a person who has a womb that's functional from her procreative body, from her uterus, from her womb. So this is how that actually kind of like happens in nature. We are born, our procreative difference, which is not sexual anatomy because we don't see it, and it's not sexual orientation because we can have sex any which way we want. Our procreative function is much more elemental. It's pretty much more essential than our function of like hunger and thirst and breath, right? To nature. It's more elemental. It's really nature's main interest is proliferation, right? Reproduction, the perpetuation. So the optimal perpetuation, in fact, which in our day has become cultural selection. We have left the days of natural selection, to use Darwin's semi-biased term, long behind us. we are definitely culturally selecting our young, and I can go back to that topic. But how it happens in nature is this: we're born pretty much all alike. I mean, we can look differently cosmetically. We can have different exterior, sexual organs, or we can have different eye color or hair color or skin color or, I don't know, size. In voice, but basically we're all born the same from the point of view of nature, which is non-procreators. And we stay in that role until we hit puberty.